Peter. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the PIH show. Today, we are with our guest, Stacy, who has joined us to ask some wonderful questions, which we think would possibly help you as well. So welcome. Let me have the rest of the team introduce themselves. Carolina?
Yes. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I'm Carolina, a plant-based expert and registered dietitian. And I am so excited to be here. We definitely love spreading wisdom and helping you guys as much as we can. And then we have Sawyer.
Hi, everybody. I'm Sawyer Hoffman. I'm a Nesta certified personal trainer and an attorney in California as well.
And he has a six-pack. And tons of muscles.
Right now,
forget the fact that he's a lawyer. Who cares? But he's got a six-pack.
That makes me an authority figure, right? In the space, anyway. No, probably not even really right now, because it's been bulk season straight through summer for me. So yeah, not
well,
super.
I think your expertise are going to be completely coming to use. We need your wisdom and experience today, Sawyer, because I think Stacy has some questions in regards to fitness.
Great, let's do it.
Hi, Stacy.
Hello.
Hi, so happy to have you on this show. Welcome.
Thank you.
Yeah, so let's start by just tell us about yourself. Tell us your name, where you're from, if you have kids, have been married, do you have a dog, whatever.
Okay. So I'm Stacy Averill. I am married. My husband and I are coming up on 14 years and we have 5 kids.
5 kids?
Yeah.
Good for you. That's amazing.
Yeah.
You're busy.
Yeah, very. So it's a load of fun. The kids are from 3 to 12. So we're in that really fun all hands on deck phase right now. So I'm lucky that I get to stay home with them. My husband works, we make the one income thing work, and it's been really fun to be able to do that for our family. We went vegan about 3 years ago. It'll be 3 years this fall, like the whole family.
Fantastic.
People ask me all the time, like, what do your kids eat? How do you get them like off of mac and cheese and chicken nuggets? And I'm like,
yeah.
Actually, it's not as hard as you think. So I find like I'm always talking with my other mom friends about like how to introduce more vegan foods, and it's really fun. But I've always been into fitness. Like the first like book I bought for myself at Barnes and Noble was like the Body for Life training book when I was like a teenager, like 14. And I've always loved weight training. I did a yoga certification like 15 years ago. And it's always been a part of my life. I've loved running and lifting and all the things. And like we regularly hike as a family. And so I actually I've dabbled in veganism a lot over the years, but what made it stick 3 years ago was I was doing, after my 5th baby was born, I like dove into a weight training program with a great trainer, and she taught me to count macros. And as I was doing that, I'm like coming up short every single day on protein. And I'm like, am I just supposed to be like snacking on turkey all day long? Like, this is not who I am. It was so much more meat than I was ever used to eating. And I was like, I've been totally fine without eating like this much protein. And so something's not right. So that took me down this rabbit hole of like researching optimal nutrition. And at the same time, I had like 2 different people that I'd known or grown up with that had like they were in their like early 40s and had died suddenly of heart attacks. And like, we're totally healthy people. And so I was like, what is causing a healthy person to just drop dead? And so like, as you can imagine, that like totally pointed me to plant-based whole foods. And we made the switch, and I started following Dr. Sadeghi and like tons of vegan doctors on Instagram just to like get all the knowledge and information I could. It's like, how can we be the healthiest family we can be and like the least impact on the environment? Because we're a big family, and I'm aware of those concerns. And so like everything, they're like ethical, environmental, health-wise, it's all
It does kind of just proliferate into all the corners of your life, huh? It's pretty
Yeah,
cool.
it totally does.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Cool.
so that's me and my background and like why we're vegan. And so
Awesome.
So, and thanks for that intro. Stacy, like specific questions do you have around fitness and health today?
okay, so I've looked at a ton of different sources for how much, like if I'm talking about counting my macros to like
Mhm.
optimize my muscle building and fat loss, whatever.
Mhm.
Most of the time I just like to focus on eating whole foods, but occasionally I'm like, I'd like to shred a little bit, or I'd like to put on some muscle. So then I start thinking about counting macros, and I've heard all kinds of numbers from like, anyway, so I'm just trying to figure out how much protein do I need and how much fat do I need,
Mhm.
and like what's the balance.
Mhm.
Everybody has
All
a different
right.
opinion, so that's my big question.
It's true, and I that's why I have gone, and I went through the same thing you did, Stacy, before. When I first started getting into fitness, it was like bodybuilding.com forums were like the thing, or like
Yeah.
the gym guru guy who's been doing it for 30 years the same way as the thing. And so, yeah, you have a lot of different people with a lot of different opinions, and they're coming at you with all this experience, and they're saying, this is the way to do it. This is the way. And so that's when the science really helps clears it up for us. So that's what I did. I dove into the science, and I was like, wow, this really helps clear it up, because, I had been all over the spectrum with how much protein I was eating, especially before I was vegan. There were times where I was eating over 200 grams a day, did not feel good doing that. It was like definitely one of those things that I had to figure out over time, and the science has definitely helped clear that up for me. I'll let Carolina and Angie talk about the amount of fat in your diet that's necessary, because that's not so um the only way that would be relevant for fitness purposes is the amount of calories that you're getting in, but like otherwise you just want to have enough fat in your dietary fat, and the right kinds of fat for it to be healthy, for you to be able to thrive on it. But in terms of protein, I can tackle that first. So the International Society of Sports Nutrition has an official position that they've established, and there's also been a couple of systematic reviews that have been done about the topic of protein intake, because what you have is a lot of studies being done, and some of them are industry funded, some of them aren't, and some, you know what I mean? So you have like all kinds of conflicting interests and stuff like that. And then, so you have a systematic review, which is basically a review of the best kinds of studies that have been done over the years. And they kind of pile them all together and say, okay, what can we glean? What are the best things that we can take away from all these studies? So it kind of does the work for you and compiles all the data. And what they found was they had, low to like moderate recreational exercise people who are more just like sedentary, some for the most part, but are trying to stay somewhat active. Those people need only about 0.8 grams per kilogram per day of body weight of protein. So that works out to be like, if you're, for instance, let me get my calculator out. I always have to do this. If you're, for instance, 130-pound female, right? And you go and you convert that to kilograms. So that's about 59 kilograms times 0.8. Okay. So that's 47 grams of protein a day. That's pretty low. That's pretty easy to achieve. But again, that's for people that are kind of lightly active, not trying to build a bunch of muscle, anything like that. But if you decide, hey, I do want to build some more muscle, that's when the protein intake becomes a little more important. And so then they have this kind of recommendation that says endurance exercise at a moderate to high level, you would benefit from somewhere between 1.2 to 1.4 grams per kilogram a day. So 1.2 to 1.4, that's like saying, so if you're a 59 kilogram female, which is 130 pounds, times 1.2, that's 70 grams, okay? And then 59 times 1.4 is 82. So 70 to 80 about grams is good for like an endurance athlete or somebody who's a little more serious about their fitness. And then you have the like really high end of the spectrum, like the strength athletes, right? The people who are really trying to get every drop of juice they can out of their exercise in terms of building muscle and having it specifically for that reason. That's the range where you want to get into like the 1.6 to 2.2 grams per kilogram of body weight per day, or of protein per day. And that would be for a 59 kilogram female would be 1.6 would be 94. Okay, so it's not an obscene amount of protein that you need to gain muscle. It really comes down to, are you getting enough protein for like whatever your needs are? Like for most people starting out, don't even need that 1.6 number yet. They're probably just getting going, but it is their like optimal range according to the science. But then on the other hand, if you've been training for a long time and it's a little bit harder for you to put on muscle and you're really trying to, push the limits of what your body can do after a while, then that's when you want to start getting into the higher levels of protein. Also, eating more protein tends to be more satiating too. So if you really want to, if you're doing a cut, for instance, and you're trying to keep as much muscle on your body as you can, you might want to increase that protein amount temporarily while you're doing this cut and then go back to maintenance and lower it again. But ultimately, what really matters in terms of changing your body composition when it comes to like, okay, am I trying to build muscle or am I trying to lose fat right now? That becomes more important the more advanced you get, because your body becomes accustomed to training and it's not going to be willing to do one or the other very well unless you really focus on it. And the other thing is, you want to kind of manipulate your calories to the point where you are now you're getting adequate protein the whole time. You might want to increase it slightly when you're cutting to encourage muscle retention and appetite control. But as long as you're getting adequate protein that whole time and doing intense physical exercise, resistance training exercise, you're going to be able to retain and build muscle. It's just a matter of, okay, what are we going to do with the calories now? So, and studies have shown, I just listened to a podcast about it too. Studies have shown that, the weight loss portion and the weight gain portion are really dictated by calories, because calories are energy. And as long as you're doing enough protein, it seems that, low carb dieters or high carb dieters don't do any better than each other on average. It's just more like, what can you stick to for a long enough time that it feels attainable to you? And what are you, and as long as you're focusing on calories, you'll be good. So what I tell people is, okay, you want to set a pretty ambitious protein amount so that you can even into your later training days and like when your body is resisting putting on muscle more, you want to set a good protein amount so that you are encouraged to keep building muscle even through those times. And so once you kind of set your protein amount, that's when you can start to increase calories when you want to build muscle. And that can be in the form of adding more carbs or adding more fat. I prefer to add more carbs because it fuels intense workouts, and that's going to help you put on muscle too. And then the other side is when you want to lose some fat, then you can increase protein a little bit, up to you how much, but you'll kind of, I think the more of a caloric deficit you get into, probably the higher you want to set it within reason, so that you can keep your appetite a little bit under control. In addition to adding more volume in your food, like more vegetables and stuff like that, as opposed to starchy carbohydrates and things like that. So I know I just went for a long time, but hopefully that makes sense. You don't need to overdo it with the protein. Like, it's not like, oh, once if I decide I want to build muscle, I need to like shoot it up, like double it or something like that. It's really just finding out, okay, for my body weight, my body composition right now, and the amount of years I've been training, how much do I need based on what the science says? It's probably not going to be an obscene amount. Biggest and strongest I ever was eating like 130 grams of protein a day. So it's like, take everything with a grain of salt in terms of like, they say this is the best, but it's like, you're still going to be able to build a ton of muscle and strength, even at the step below that, you know what I mean? So, right. Don't think that if you're not in the 1.6, grams per kilogram range, that you're not going to build muscle or something like that. This is just what the science says in terms of like, this is where we stop seeing benefits above this amount.
Cool.
Yeah. Do you have any questions about that? Anything that was unclear?
No, that was really helpful. And yeah, that was really helpful. Thank you.
Great. Sure. And if anything,
I have a question, Sawyer.
Sure.
Okay, so when we're trying to calculate the protein need, oftentimes people, like, for example, if we have a 200-pound woman, say it's a woman who 5'3" or 5'4", who weighs 200 pounds, and they want to try to try to figure out how much protein they need. If they take that, if they convert, if let's say 200 pounds divided by 2.2, so they're 90 kilograms, right? 90 kilograms times 1.2 is 90 times 1.2 amount grams of protein. That's 100 grams. So for those people who are very overweight or obese, they get this huge overestimation. So for example, if someone's 200 and they have 20% body fat, they're really 160 pounds of, so do you ever ask people to like make sure that they're, it gets very complicated because what do you do in that case?
Yeah, that's a good question. So the question is like, is it based on lean body mass or is it based on total body mass? Excuse me. And really the answer to that is, yeah, I usually estimate it based on somebody's approximate, not like pure lean body mass, because I think that might skew it a little bit the other way. But I think like if they were at a healthier body weight, that's typically what I use. But the reason for that I'm not using total lean body mass is because at that point, when somebody is overweight, they're typically used to eating a lot more calories, and you can't just cut their calories way down without seeing a lot of negative effects. So, one thing I don't, first of all, I don't cut their calories way down right away. And second of all, having that little bit of a buffer in terms of like saying, okay, what if they're at a healthy body weight instead of saying, what if they were 100% lean, is going to give them that buffer in terms of appetite control with the extra protein. So it's like, even if it's not necessarily for muscle protein synthesis and everything like that, and it would be, extra over the top, it would also help control diet. But Carolina can talk more about how other ways you can control your appetite. It's just a matter of with the protein calculation though, it's like, okay, I do like to give people a little bit of a buffer if I know the appetite control is going to come into play, especially if they're not tracking, like, if you're just tracking carbs, that could come in the form of pretty much anything. You could be eating sugary candy, or you could be eating sweet potatoes or something. So it's like, I want to make sure that built into that structure right there is going to be something that's definitely more satiating, so that even if they do have a few days in a row that are like not so great with the carbs, that would otherwise be filling if they were good, would at least help them out in that way too. Because really, when it comes down to it, it's about sustainability as well. But
so essentially we do have different formulas for people who are overweight or obese, that we use in a clinical setting that accounts for calories and protein. So we do not use the same formula across the board. It wouldn't make sense because their fat cells require more energy. Of course, if we want them to get to a healthy weight, of course, we will eventually, we are going to cut calories, the unhealthy calories, right? We're going to maximize quality and nutrient-dense foods, high fiber diets, of course. But you can't do that formula across the board, because that wouldn't make sense for someone who has so much more fat cells, right, adipose tissue that requires more energy, and it requires, it requires protein, but it doesn't require that much protein, right? So essentially, there are a lot of long-term complications with too much protein. So I love what you mentioned, the 0.8, 0.8 to 1 is what we use for a standard healthy individual. Anything, from like the 1.2 to 2, like I said, people who are really working towards muscle gain, but really professional athletes, like a standard person, unless Sawyer works out a lot. He's got lots of muscles to feed, but a standard person going to the gym and doing a regular workout, a normal frame, Stacy seems like, like we're kind of similar builds. You wouldn't need a great amount of protein. You need enough for your muscle to be able to rebuild and repair and grow, especially if I think that you are very conscious about your workout.
I'm glad you put that in context too, because it's not like I'm speaking purely to the science of like athletes, and then Carolina's going to tell you like, okay, but this is what like normal healthy individual is doing, and you can decide where you want to be on that spectrum, and you can know the pros and the cons of each. So because like for sure, shoveling the protein, it gets old and it gets expensive and it gets like really
it's
tiring.
Very dangerous for your livers and your kidneys.
Yeah,
long term. If you're
protein.
doing like bizarre amounts of protein, like Stacey, I don't think you're fine. But right,
Yeah.
Sawyer, like when you agree, like in your industry, people overdo their protein, and what studies show,
Especially
show
Carolina,
that
sorry to cut you off, especially when they're doing overdoing the protein and it's animal protein
animal
full of
form,
saturated fat, which clogs your arteries.
choline, and right, exactly. So, yeah,
Probably.
great point. So
Yeah, and sorry, I'll just throw this in real quick, is that like even when somebody looks outwardly healthy, like you were saying, those people that drop dead in their 40s, and you're like, what the hell? Like they work out, what the heck? And it's a lot of times is that, yeah, they're eating like macronutrient wise, they're eating for their body composition goals that are great, but their organs are like really not happy, right?
their
Obviously. So it's like,
blood cholesterol and
right, you can look at somebody and say, wow, that guy looks healthy, but in reality, their organs, they might be, their arteries are full of cholesterol, and it's like you need to kind of do the research to know where you want to fall on that spectrum of like looking healthy versus actually being healthy. And
right, absolutely.
And
Yeah,
we'll teach you
I
how
always
to do
call them
both.
like, yes,
I
I
think
always
we
call
with the
them internal
plant-based
health.
diet.
yeah, I mean that's why I love vegan fitness, is because I don't have to sacrifice my health to gain a certain amount of muscle, because if I was eating animal sources, it'd really be like I'd be not listening to AHA's recommendation for how much cholesterol or saturated fat to be eating a
For
day. And
those of you who don't know what AHA is, American Heart Association.
yeah, so there's definitely like this science that kind of gets swept under the rug when you're in the fitness world, because they're like, well, that's not the way I want to live. I want to eat this amount of protein and whatever, but they assume that it needs to come from animals, when we've kind of found this way of doing it in a healthier way and not having to worry so much about the downstream effects of trying to put on all this muscle in your youth and not worrying about when you're older. But sorry, go ahead, Carolina. Go. I like where you're
No
going.
worries, no worries. No, I love everything you guys are adding. So relatable. I'm sure to Stacey. And I'm so happy we're answering her questions in a way that's relatable to everyone else. I feel like, because you know what your clients ask you, and I know what my clients ask me. But essentially, when we look at studies that show the long-term complications of protein, such as liver and kidney damage. So just to give a background for everyone, so your kidneys are responsible for filtering your blood, creating your urine, and then you have your liver that's responsible for detoxifying your body from, byproducts from metabolism and also drugs and alcohol. When you have too much protein, you can create, and this is where it gets tricky, right? Because the research is done on animal studies. So we see all these negative benefits, and essentially, like, it's there are compounds in the protein that are causing that, and they're causing accumulation of ammonia and urea which are essentially toxic things that we don't want, that can cause long-term complications. But there's also a lot of the saturated fat, which is our undesirable kind of fat that raises cholesterol levels, because a lot of these studies are using the standard American diet, which is really high in animal protein. Right. So, it'd be interesting to see, researchers out there, if you're listening, it'll be interesting to see, like, overdoing plant protein. And, I personally don't see any long-term.
It shows that kidneys aren't really going into hyperfiltration the same way they are when you overeat
Correct.
protein. So it's pretty cool to see the emerging studies about plant-based diets and how they actually don't have a lot of the negative associations with higher protein and stuff that we typically see. But yeah, it's still new, because plant-based diets, even though they've been around for a long time, are really starting to get more thoroughly studied now that they're catching on more. So
absolutely. And even things such as, so we know for kidney health, sorry, we're kind of getting off topic here, Stacey, I promise I'm going to touch on your macronutrients next, but
This is fascinating.
when we look at kidney health, right? I have a lot of clients with chronic kidney disease, and we see what the Kidney Foundation recommends is a plant predominant diet, especially with plant proteins, and avoiding animal proteins, because they don't have the same effect on the kidneys, right? Because your kidneys, remember, so we have protein, your body breaks down to amino acids, right, which are the units that it's then are put together again to build other proteins in your body. So these amino acids, when we see that coming from animal protein, right, this is when they can be dangerous in really high amounts over time, because your kidneys have to filter and work with them. And that can pose a lot of damage. So what we see from the kidney associations, actually, like, we don't really see this happening with plant proteins because they don't have a lot of these metabolites that animal proteins do. So it's actually, that's what I follow the kidney association, and I recommend mostly plant proteins to my clients who have some level of chronic kidney disease. So it will be interesting, right, to learn more about the high protein diet. We obviously, me as a dietitian, in the last years, the research out there, like I mentioned, is mostly on the regular, American diet, not Stacey's diet, which is incredible. And by the way, I want my family to be exactly like yours one day, all vegan. It will happen. So and so we know, I know when I'm giving recommendations for someone who is not vegan, I need to emphasize the possible complications of too much protein, right? So interesting to see, like, with beans, while you're getting all this protein from beans, you're also getting all this amazing fiber and phytochemicals. Like, would that be an issue? We don't know. I'm assuming no. So obviously I'm not a researcher, but anyway, so yes, there's definitely long-term complications for someone who's eating a lot of the animal proteins because of all the kind of baggage that comes with it. In your case, like Sawyer and I mentioned, of course, you want to be within that range, like the 0.8 to 1. We see with the studies, anything after 2 grams of protein per kilogram. So remember, you're like on the 0.8 to 1. Anything beyond 2 or beyond 35% of your calories, that's when we see issues, right? So there's a lot of disorders that come from that, protein disorders. So you're not, obviously we're not concerned with you there, especially because you're eating a plant-based, hopeful plant-based diet. But yeah, so I guess the long story short, we kind of grew up thinking we need this crazy amount of protein. Is protein essential? Absolutely. Your body needs protein for so many things, right? But we grew up thinking that, oh my gosh, protein. So I have had clients who have been doing macro counting from, someone who gave them this formula, and someone, probably your size, someone who is like 120 pounds, eating 120 grams of protein, literally eating 120 grams of protein. And what would tell me exactly what I think Sawyer mentioned earlier, or you made me mention, I feel sluggish, I'm fatigued, I can't go to the bathroom, right, because of constipation. I gaining weight. So another thing, everyone listening, too much protein will cause weight gain, just like too many carbohydrates and too much fat. Too much protein, and again, we're talking more of like the standard diet, but too much protein and too many carbohydrates will raise your triglyceride levels, right? So when you do your cholesterol panel, you see your good cholesterol, your bad cholesterol, your triglycerides is essentially how your body stores excess calories in terms of fat.
It's funny you have to say that, though, because it's like protein is the only macronutrient that hasn't been demonized in the media, right? So we have like these people who are like, oh, fat is the enemy or carbs are the enemy, and never is anybody attacking protein. Everybody's like, okay, protein's fine. And now you have these plant-based people in the world that are like saying, well, maybe it is not so all that great. It is important. I think that,
of course,
not that it doesn't matter, but it's like we should have a kind of a realistic view about what to do. It doesn't mean just eat all protein and like the more is better attitude, So I'm glad you brought that.
100%. No, yeah, that's such a good point. And when I tell people you can gain weight, and actually this client of mine, just by adjusting her protein and nothing else, lost 5 pounds like this. She didn't try. She just lowered her protein intake, right? Of course, she's lowering calories. But she was just forced to eat so much more than what her body needs, right? So your body has, your basal metabolic rate, essentially the standard amount of protein, the minimum it needs to function. If you were to sit on a couch all day and do nothing, your body still needs calories to perform all of its bodily functions. So obviously, depending on your activity level, you would need a little bit more, depending on your age, if you have any chronic conditions, of course. But I want to touch on the macros, and then I'm going to pass it back to Sawyer because he's the fitness expert. no, I'm definitely not. Here's my professional and personal belief. So I think macro counting has its place, and I've talked to a lot of my sports dietitian friends to kind of get their input because they work with this on a daily, on a day-to-day basis. I think macro counting does have a place temporarily as a way to achieve some sort of muscle, body goal, structure, composition. I'm sure it can be very helpful. Scientifically speaking, there is no high quality studies on macro counting and whether that helps, whether you're looking for building muscle or losing weight. I think at the end of the day is another restriction that puts you sort of like a box. So people can use it different, right? Can go the good way or the bad way. So, kind of give two examples. So if someone is, like, I know Sawyer mentioned this earlier, if you're looking at a specific amount of carbohydrates to eat in a day, they could go two ways. You could eat bagels, right, and still meet your carbohydrates. So it doesn't distinguish for the quality of the foods. And of course, if you're working with a professional, of course, they will recommend you to eat the high quality nutrient dense foods. I'm sure that's what Sawyer does. But for a lot out there, there's so much out there. Some people don't know what they're doing, and it's confusing. So okay, I need to eat 100 grams of carbohydrates. There you go. I'm going to eat, whatever is a carbohydrate. So it could go that route. It could also go in the route that maybe you ate some lower quality foods and now you want to eat some fruits and vegetables, which are carbohydrates, and but I exceeded my limit, right? So you limit yourself in terms of diversity, which some studies that I've seen, with kind of any type of restrictive diet is that people tend to have low micronutrient levels, so low vitamins and minerals, some deficiencies, right? Because you're kind of in that box. So it can definitely be difficult for someone who does not have the proper guidance, like someone like Sawyer or someone who doesn't have nutrition knowledge. Again, in terms of just the overall structure of it, for me, again, as a day-to-day dietitian, obviously I'm not working with people who are trying to build, fitness in the fitness industry, of course, even athletes I work less with. So I'm sure there's a place there, but for the normal people just going to the gym and doing their thing day to day, it can definitely create it can even trigger some disordered eating patterns, right? Because now you're looking at calories, you're looking at grams, so you're making choices based on that, not so much based on the quality. It could trigger some social disturbances, like if you're eating out, but oh my gosh, you're eating pizza, I can't eat that, or I've already exceeded my macros for the day. So in my head, as a long-term thing, I don't think there's a place for that, and this is just me personally. For the day-to-day person, I think I'm more of the intuitive eating, obviously knowing what's in your plate, right? So we know we want half of our plate vegetables, you want about a fourth of protein, and you want about a fourth of starch. We want whole grains and starchy vegetables over refined grains, right? We want beans, nuts, soybeans as protein, and we want a variety of vegetables. That's more of my approach, but I'm a very lax dietitian. There's all different types. But again, I know with my friends who are working in the sports dietetics world, there is a place. It helps the structure, right? It helps if people are doing a program, a fitness program, and they have their macros structure and their high quality foods, nutrient dense foods. We see great results. People are more motivated, and I'm sure the macros play a role. But Sawyer, please, enlighten us on your experience and how you apply it.
Yeah, I really like everything you just said. I think that, you can take it to a place where it's unhealthy and you're not focusing on quality at all, and you're just focusing on how you look as opposed to how you actually feel and how your biomarkers are doing, which I know Angie could talk more about. But I think that, there is sometimes where structure, like Carolina was saying, could go either way. Like you could go, I think like I really thrive with the macro thing, and it took me a long time to figure that out. But some people, they may be more intuitive, but it's also not black or white. You could also go, I'm just going to track protein, make sure I have enough protein, and then I'm happy. Like, and I'm not going to limit my calories. Like you can make your own version of any of this. This is your life, your body. So if you decide, A lot of my clients, I'm just like, okay, we want to focus on fat loss, so let's definitely count calories in some form. And you don't really care about protein or muscle building so much, so we won't emphasize that so much. Cool. But sometimes I'm like, let's track protein and calories and let the carbs and fat fall where they may. It doesn't really matter. Sometimes I just have like, anywhere along that spectrum that it makes sense for them. I want to have them there. And some people just like it's not a good idea to limit at all because they tend to take it too far and then, all that stuff. But Stacy, you had a question and maybe you could repeat it really quick about fat intake or carb intake. Was there something around on that you wanted to learn too?
Yeah, for sure. And first, I just wanted to say, like, Carolina, I so appreciate what you were saying. And like, for me, the counting macros thing is exactly like what Sawyer said. Like every so often, I'm going to just like check in and make sure like, is this kind of where I want to be health-wise? And then we go back to intuitive eating. And especially with a house full of children, like I'm very aware of not raising disordered eaters. And so like their food choices are their choices. Like if they go to a birthday party and there's cake and ice cream, I'm not like, you can't have that. Like they make those choices for themselves. And especially when we first transitioned, like I cook vegan at home, but like if we're going out to dinner, you can order what you feel like you need to order. And it was tricky because some of the kids like would still order chicken nuggets when we were out and the other kids are like, what are you doing? Anyway,
That's
so,
so
but
cute.
like none of my kids have any desire to eat meat anymore. Like since we've
Awesome.
been doing this so long, but occasionally it's like, oh, my friends have ice cream, so we're gonna get that, But anyway, with the fat
I
thing,
love that though. I love that you give that flexibility.
Especially with kids, because it's like they know that they're choosing it. Because if you didn't, then they would probably rebel at some point, right? They'd be like, well, I haven't been able to do this for so long. I'm gonna do it.
Totally.
What was the question you had though?
Yeah. So there's like I don't know if you'd call it a trend, but there's like a group that focuses on like no oil and like no fats at all. And
let's talk about that.
Yeah, so that's kind of confusing because like you always hear about healthy fats and like I know animal fats are like what you were saying, like they raise your triglyceride and cholesterol and all of those like negative consequences. But like if I'm looking at a lot of protein comes packed with some fat, like black beans have fat and so it seems weird like if people are pushing super low levels of fat, but like is peanut butter okay sometimes? Like it's kind of confusing.
This is good. I love that question because
I
now we're
love
going to kinds of fats that there are in food. And I think Angie and Carolina, you guys can handle this, and I'll just throw in something at the end if I feel like we missed anything. So go for it, guys.
Well,
Dr. Angie, gonna go?
start. Yeah, initially when I joined the whole plant-based movement, first of all, when you first go plant-based and you think you're like the only one on earth and you start like discovering people, I discovered different groups and different doctors. And I literally was like, oh my God, there are other doctors who are plant-based and they're onto this. So it was very exciting to see all these doctors. But then as you get into it, you realize, oh, wow, there are a lot of opinions about how we should eat and how we should do a plant-based diet. I think some things are very evident. Nobody says eat donuts and cookies. Everyone says eat whole foods, right? I think everyone is in agreement with whole foods, plant-based, but or primarily plant-based, right? Everyone would say that. But then there are some differences. Some people say no oil, no fats. And some people say, well, no, well-balanced diet, such as our group. But then the question is, where did that no fat, no oil literature come from? Well, early on, there were some extremely weak studies that showed that if you avoid all fat, all oil, you could reverse heart disease. Okay. And so that was debunked by my friend Danielle Bellardo, who came out publicly and debunked all of that. So I wish she was here right now because I'm not a lipidologist and I'm not a cardiologist. I'm a gastroenterologist. So I'm just regurgitating what I've heard from Danielle Bellardo.
I just want to make it clear, Danielle is a cardiologist. She's
a board certified cardiologist. An
I've been
amazing
following
woman.
her this same amount of time. Like I loved your podcast together. I learned so much from that.
Oh,
Yeah.
good. Yeah, she's been a vegan for 11 years. She's an ethical vegan like me. But what I love about her, she's not partial about the evidence. She regurgitates the science, even if it's bad for veganism, she'll regurgitate the correct, and she sits on all the nutrition boards and everything. So it's not about twisting the literature so it looks good for veganism, right? We have to be truthful about the research, and there's so much that needs to be still done, but we don't have to twist the literature, because almost all these papers, like thousands and thousands of randomized control trials, are telling you a plant predominant diet is healthier overall, right? So we don't really have to twist the literature. But there's a group that says if you eat no oil, you could reverse heart disease for those people who have plaque that is closed up in their coronaries, right? Well, it turns out that that's actually not true. The studies were flawed, and the way they angiogrammed it was not the standards of how you should. And again, I'm not an expert in this, but the way they did the imaging was incorrect, and you can't base opinion either way about it. So that's why the American Heart Association has not put 100% oil-free plant-based diet into their guidelines, right? If it's not in the guidelines, you have to wonder why, okay? So let me talk about this really quick, and I know I'm going a little bit off track, but this is why alternative medicine is not medicine, right? If it's alternative medicine, it's not science, right? When does it become science? When it's not alternative medicine anymore. So when Danielle tells me, Angie, I was like, well, why isn't it in the guidelines? Shouldn't everyone say in their guidelines, everyone should eat 100% whole food plant-based no oil diet? And it turns out, well, no, olive oil is actually good for you. It's omega-3, right? So it's actually good for your GI tract. It's actually good for your cardiovascular disease. It could lower your LDL. So anyhow, the no oil thing, in my opinion, is definitely, there's no question that it's just, if you want to do it, go for it. I couldn't personally do it because I love a little oil in my food because it just makes it more enjoyable. So that's all I had to say, but I'm going to turn it to Carolina to tell you how much fat you need, what kind of fats you need, et cetera, et cetera.
And
Yeah.
can you explain the difference between unsaturated and saturated fat and poly and mono unsaturated fats really quick? So, okay.
Absolutely. Dr. Angie, thank you so much for bringing this up. And I love that you highlight these things, because even within the plant-based, vegan, whole food, plant-based industry, people have their opinions, like I said. So even doctors, different types of MDs have different opinions. So I can imagine how confusing it is for just an individual searching online, trying to do the best for their body and reading all these different things by doctors, right, which are extremely renowned. And it kind of leaves us like, okay, what is the right answer, right? So I'm so happy you brought that up. And I think what we are trying to do here with PIH, with Planted in Health, is we are trying to base everything on science. Do we love whole food plant-based diets? Absolutely. Do we wish everybody would eat this way and thrive? Of course. Are we realistic about the science and people's lifestyles and where people are? Absolutely, right? So I think we're just trying to help people make educated decisions, but we are 100% evidence-based, right? So there is no cherry-picking data here. But I love that you mentioned that, and I think it will make people feel a little bit better if they are confused. Like, okay, I know there is disagreement even within people who are whole food plant-based, right? Which is something that I've encountered when I started, reaching out and working with doctors and reading more about it as well. So thank you for that. When it comes to oils, if research is always evolving. The research on nutrition that we have from many, many years ago that is as close as plant-based as it gets, besides vegan, vegetarian, is a Mediterranean diet, right? A Mediterranean diet, which includes fish, which includes some meat, very little, includes a lot of vegetables, includes a lot of healthy fats, a lot of nuts and seeds, a lot of olive oil. I can tell you across the board, every time there are studies coming out on whatever type of condition or biomarker that is looking at, right? So we have, chronic diseases, we have heart disease, we have metabolic syndrome with obesity, we have diabetes, we have all these kinds of conditions that we're studying in relation to nutrition. I can tell you across the board, Mediterranean diet is most always extremely successful, right? Have they started doing a lot of studies on whole food plant-based? You know, we're starting, like Sawyer said, it's been around for many years. We are just now kind of diving into it as the health industry and researchers. So, you know, we do see a lot of vegan vegetarian diets. We see a lot of vegan plant-based, you know, great success, which is why we advocate for this diet. But needless to say, there are a lot more studies on Mediterranean diets, and the results are always, you know, phenomenal, especially when it comes to cholesterol levels, right? If you're eating again, a whole food plant, mostly plant, vegetable predominant, but olive oil is a huge part of their diet, right? So you think about, like, well, if olive oil was just all that absolutely horrendous, then why are these Mediterranean diets showing such great success with a lot of chronic conditions? So that's, you know, again, I rely on science, right? Are oils more calorie dense? Absolutely. Are there oils that are mostly bad fats, right? I'm going to put into very simple terms. I hate the words good and bad, but, you know, healthier types of fats, unhealthier types of fats is where I'm going to put it. But yes, there are a lot of oils that are more of the fats that raise your cholesterol. These are less desirable, right? But so for someone who's maybe trying to go on a weight loss journey, right? So you're like, do we minimize oil because of it's really packed in calories and it's really easy to overdo it and it doesn't bring fiber and other great nutrients? Yes, of course. That is just for, you know, kind of a calorie mindfulness approach. When it comes to its effects on our blood cholesterol and so on, and we see that with mostly olive oil and avocado oil because they have more of the good fats, then yeah, we actually see good results when it comes, you know, obviously you're looking at vegetable intake, you're not talking about oil, you're talking about the overall diet. But I just wanted to put that out there because, again, we base it on science, and this is so far what we have with a lot of nutrition studies. So, you know, of course, you have to be mindful of too much oil, especially which forms of oil you're using, right? Oils in fried, processed, you know, potato chips, burgers, and fries are completely different than you drizzling some extra virgin olive oil on your salad, right? So now when it comes to the healthy fats and good fats, bad fats, it's important to know that all foods that are fat sources have both. There is no food that has just good fats or just bad fats. They always have both. It's just chemistry. Now, some foods will have more, like I said, and some will have less, right? So we have the good healthy fats. We have polyunsaturated. We have monounsaturated. These are just fancy terms for different molecular structures, but unsaturated is the word you're looking for. And then you have our negative, less healthy fats, our saturated fats. These are the fats that are associated with raising cholesterol levels and heart disease, and which I would love if Dr. Danielle was here. We need to bring her on. She's the absolute expert on this. I would love to, you know, to hear her explain this also. So what do we see as healthy fats? We have nuts, seeds. We have our olive oil and avocado oil that have a larger amount of those unsaturated fats. And we have, like you mentioned, like some beans, right? Like if you look at like hummus, which is like sesame seeds, and also chickpeas have it. So a lot of the foods, plant protein sources will have it, especially the nuts and the seeds. And then we have, you know, fish and seafood, which doesn't apply here because you are 100% vegan, that also have some good fats. That fish is a great source of omega-3, which is one type of the good fats that we see in several times again in studies, reducing inflammatory markers. So it helps with reducing inflammation. It has all great benefits in our body. But so are walnuts and chia seeds and hemp seeds and flax seeds are your top omega-3 sources in a plant-based diet. And then, you know, if people want to supplement, personally, I don't think this is necessary. People do like algae, which is where it comes from originally, not from the fish. So point in case here, with plant-based diets, most of our fat sources are, if you're talking about whole foods, they are the good types of fats, right? The fats that, and they're not always associated with weight gain. And this is a very common thing. What happens with fats is, so if you're looking gram per gram, so when we're talking about the amount of calories in a macronutrient, so we have carbohydrates and we have proteins. that have 4 grams of 4 calories per gram, and then we have fats and alcohol, which have more, 9 calories per gram. So this is why people associate fats with gaining weight, because they are more calorie dense. That is true. But again, they do have these great benefits that we see that we don't always associate. It's not always associated with weight gain. It's because what matters is the sources, right? So we see a lot of these food sources like nuts and seeds are also a great source of fiber, right? And protein and other great nutrients and minerals like zinc and iron and so on. So yes, there is a huge difference between the sources of your fats. Sorry, I'm kind of all over the place here. I hope I'm answering your question. I go really into the fats. But yeah, so here's where it matters for you. The sources of your fat, like the whole sum is what you're looking for. Peanut butter, great, go for it. Is peanut butter high in calories? Yes. Like, if you eat a half a tub, trust me, I would. It's good. Like, I would eat the whole tub of peanut butter. Well, if you're not using that for energy in your workouts, if your workouts are not that intense where you're gonna use it all, then yeah, it may result in some weight gain. Obviously, not in one day and not if you do it one time, but if it's a consistent habit, yes, of course. At the end of the day, there are just additional calories, but not a lot of fiber there. But if you're talking about, eating nuts and seeds as a snack, having some peanut butter in your oatmeal, adding some to your smoothies, drizzling olive oil in your roasted vegetables, right? These are all parts of a whole food diet. Now, I want to talk about one thing, sorry, and then I'll pass it on to Sawyer, that marketing has done a great job. Whoever did the marketing for coconut oil, congratulations.
Yeah.
You're a great marketing professional because, and I fell on this before I was a dietitian. I put coconut oil in everything, even in my hair. I mean, I baked with it, I cooked with it. Sometimes I even think it tasted that great with vegetables. I was like, coconut oil is the solution. Coconut oil, and it's mostly a saturated fat. That is, I would say, and I could be wrong here on the spot, but one of the sources, the only source of a whole food plant-based diet that is a vegetable, right? It's a plant in the plant kingdom, and it's mostly saturated fat. Like, yes, coconut oil is palm oil. Sorry, obviously, yeah, we have the vegetable. Yeah, sorry, thank you. Of course, but the ones that's kind of deemed as healthy, right? Like coconut oil, like palm oil, we always kind of deem as we know not great, especially for sustainability. But the coconut oil has been this like healthy thing, and it's mostly saturated fat. Again, if you just look at the pure science and the chemical structure, it's mostly saturated fat. Guys, I'm not talking about coconut meat, and I'm not talking about coconut water or even coconut milk. I'm talking about coconut oil, which is the extracted. I love drinking fresh coconut in Brazil, where I'm from, at the beach, the best thing ever. And then eating the coconut meat, which has a ton of fiber and some protein. So anyway, so yes, coconut oil is definitely the exception. It is mostly saturated fat. So no, I don't recommend it. I would much rather people use olive oil or avocado oil, which have higher benefits and more of the unsaturated fat, which is what we like. Sorry, I would love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, no, you did a great job. Great job, Carolina. I definitely wanted to mention, there's a difference between, the biggest thing you want to make a distinction between is the saturated, unsaturated fats in terms of heart health and artery health, stuff like that, because, not only that, but also your insulin sensitivity can hinge on that too. So saturated fat is to be avoided. That's why the American Heart Association says you want to keep your saturated fat calories below like 7% of your calories. So it's like 5 to 7%. So, and I think that might be for people with heart disease already that they recommend. I'm not sure, but that's more or less, that's their recommendation, is you want to keep it a pretty low percentage of your calories coming from saturated fat. Do you guys know if that's for people with heart disease?
The percentage?
Yeah, well, never mind. It's just the AHA says that you want to keep your saturated fat calories low for a reason, because we know that saturated fat.
Oh, I think that's across the board.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
I mean, if you have a heart, especially if you have a heart condition. But I think the recommendations are just for healthy individuals as a preventative measure. But we can check.
Yeah. So
okay, guys. So we're
great. And so, and that's really,
yeah. Sorry, we have only a few minutes left. So go ahead, Sawyer.
Okay. All right. We'll wrap it up. So, so it's really hard to do that, the lower saturated fat, if you're eating things like coconut oil, if you're eating animal products, if you're eating palm oil.
Food.
So yeah, you want to avoid those. And then the other thing is that saturated fat is already a part, like Carolina was saying, of everything you're eating. So like there's a little bit in peanut butter, there's a little bit in beans and whatever. So that's why it's like it's not an evil thing to have some saturated fat, but you just want to make sure that it's not overdoing it, right? And then from a macro perspective, I'll just throw this in at the end. From a macronutrient perspective, your total fat, I don't think should dip below about 40 grams per day ish. I haven't seen data on this exactly, but I haven't experimented or had clients do lower than that and have success, because fat and protein are two of the essential macronutrients, whereas you can go without carbs for a while because your body can go into ketosis. Not that that's healthy, but just knowing like, okay, what is like absolutely essential for me to stay alive? You never want to go like zero fat. You never want to go below a certain threshold. It will affect your hormones and your health. So
And
just
your
keep an eye.
absorption. Yeah,
Yeah.
thank you for that. And your absorption, there's a lot of vitamins we call fat soluble vitamins that require fat in order to be absorbed. So you would be, if your vitamins A, D, E, and K would be depleted or less absorbed, less effectively without fat in your diet. But yeah, I think just focusing, guys, I think at the end of the day, we're focusing on whole foods, right? Of course, we all eat some processed foods. I know Dr. Ange and I, no commercial here, no ads, but we love our bitching sauce.
I love that stuff.
Food, I love it. I won't stop eating that. But of course, we all eat some sort of processed foods to a certain extent. We want to maximize whole foods as much as possible. If you're focusing on that, the saturated fat that we would try to lower will naturally be low, because when you're looking at there's a lot of protein bars and granola bars and granolas and chips and all these packaged goods that are really high in like the palm oil and other types of oils that contribute to the saturated fat. So again, if these are minimized, or if there's just like you have them less often, you're in a really good place, right? If you're focusing on whole foods.
Well, thank you guys so much. Stacey, I'm gonna ask you, was that helpful? And if you could wrap just like in a couple of sentences, tell us what you think you're going to do. Are you going to, for example, leave today and start calorie counting, macro counting, eat more saturated fat? Just tell us what you think.
No, that was perfect. And it really just kind of validated, I feel like what Carolina said about intuitive eating. I think we intuitively know what our bodies need. And I feel like this just gave me all the permission to just honor that. Like it's all about the whole foods, and I'm fine. Because for a while I was like, I do love to add a scoop of peanut butter to my oatmeal on some days. And so I'm like, is this too much? And so that was really validating. So thank you. And yeah, it's just that I can trust myself. Like I'm on the right path. And
absolutely. And listen, Stacey, we don't know you at all, but I can almost guess that you are very knowledgeable, right? You've been doing this for years. You're doing this with your kids. I'm sure you did a lot of research on your own or spoke to a professional, but trust yourself, right? Keep it simple. I mean, of course, if you want to work towards a certain body type, working with someone like Sara would be extremely helpful. But for your day-to-day life, keep it simple. No whole foods, mostly vegetables, plant proteins, less processed. There will be some processed here and there. Listen to your body. What does it need? And go from there. And of course, your workout routine is also very important for muscle building, right? And of course, you could talk to Sara 101 on this, but the exercises that you're doing, the frequency, the weight that you're lifting, all of that is very essential for muscle growth. So the protein just comes in and helps to grow it, right? But you need to have that muscle tear first. But yes, trust me, you probably know what you're doing. You just needed some more reinforcement.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for joining us. It was such a pleasure to meet your beautiful personality, your beautiful face. You're just so pleasant. And we just really enjoyed talking to you. And it seems like we could all go on and on, but we have a 11 o'clock hard stop, so we gotta go. But we're also available for you if you have any questions. Just email us. I know Carolina has done that before, where she has helped a few of our guests after the show. So feel free to email us if you have any questions. And again, thank you, and have a wonderful day.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye, Stacey.
Bye.
Okay, Carolina, so I'm going to pause recording, right?
Yes.